movie scenes where people actually die for real. This was another one of those hotly debated topics when I was in school. I remember a kid telling me that there was a scene in one of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies where a person is actually murdered in real life. They said it was the scene where Freddy pulls a girl into a fridge, and at the time I hadn't seen any of the movies, so I didn't know what they were talking about, but since then I've watched them all, and I assume they mean it's this scene, Greta's death from Nightmare on Elm Street 5. I've looked into it and I don't think there was any injuries or accidents on set, and this death is definitely fake. It doesn't even look that realistic, so I don't know how the rumour started, but it just goes to show how these stories get spread around. I'm sure a lot of you have heard some version of this story, probably with a different movie. It's not all urban legend though. There are actually a number of movie scenes where people died during its filming, and I'm going to look at a few of them here today. Starting off with the silent era, The Captive was a romantic story set in the Balkan War. At about 40 minutes into the movie, the protagonists find themselves besieged in a house whilst soldiers try to break down the door from the outside. At first, the soldiers fire their rifles at the door, and then they try to hammer on the wood with the butts of their guns. Unfortunately, whilst they were banging on the door, one of the rifles went off and hit an extra named Charles Chandler. He was shot in the forehead and killed instantly. The director Cecil B. DeMille wanted the gunfire scenes to be extra realistic, and so whilst they were firing at the door, the crew were using live ammunition in their rifles. Then for the scene where they're banging on the door with the butts of their guns, he ordered them to unload the live ammo and replace it with blank cartridges. It seems that one of the extras forgot to take out the live ammo and ended up killing a fellow cast member. As all the rifles had discharged, it was impossible for them to tell who had fired the killing shot. As for the footage itself, I can't say whether any of these scenes capture that fateful moment or if they cut it from the final release of the movie. I've watched the footage in slow motion trying to see if any of the guns discharged whilst they're hammering on the door, but I can't see anything definite. In some scenes the ends of the guns are off screen, so it could have been one of these moments, but that would just be speculation on my part. On to the 1920s now. Noah's Ark was an epic biblical-themed movie with spectacular disaster scenes. One scene in particular involved the flooding of a specially built concrete set with 600,000 gallons of water. The problem was, the set was full of extras, and none of them were given any warning on how big the flood would be. Apparently, head cameraman Hal Moore said to the director Michael Curtis, "Jesus, what are you going to do about the extras?" And Curtis replied, "They're just going to have to take their chances." This actually caused Hal Moore to quit on the spot in disgust. The scene went ahead as planned. The extras gathered on the set and the water was released. Thousands of gallons suddenly flooded the stage, and the cast, now up to the neck in water and with more crashing down on them from above, began to panic. 3 actors died during the scene and many more were injured. One of them had their leg so badly mangled that it had to be amputated. Watching the scene now, it seems insane that they were allowed to get away with it. I guess it was a different time back then. Clearly there's a lot of people here genuinely panicking for their lives. It's not just acting. There's even a horse in there with them. To be honest, I'm surprised that only 3 people died. It could have been a lot worse. It was this incident that led to film safety regulations being implemented in future movie productions. In 1967, filming began on an action movie called Kane. It was directed by Samuel Fuller and filmed in Mexico. In one scene, stuntman Jose Marco was supposed to interact with a white shark that was sedated and being kept behind a protective netting. Unfortunately, the shark wasn't sedated enough. It bit through the netting and attacked Jose, tearing into his abdomen and disemboweling him. Jose Marco's death was caught on camera, and the marketing team quickly put the footage to good use. Against the director's wishes, the film title was changed to Shark. The footage of Jose's death was inserted at the beginning of the movie, and promotional material was made that played up to the shocking nature of the accident. "Shark will rip you apart," the posters read, next to an illustration of a man being disemboweled by a shark, and some text telling about the accident involving the stuntman. Tasteful it wasn't. In fact, director Sam Fuller was so disgusted that he asked for his name to be taken off the credits, which they refused to do. It just goes to show, no matter how tragic an event is, never underestimate a marketing team's ability to turn it into publicity. On to Thailand now. During the 60s and 70s, actor Chaibancha was one of Thailand's biggest stars. He was most well known for his Red Dragon character, a masked crime-fighting action hero. In 1970, he reprised the role of Red Dragon in a movie called In Si Thong. This was the first movie that Chaibancha had produced and directed himself. Sadly, it was also to be his final movie. The last scene in the film called for Red Dragon to grab hold of a rope ladder hanging beneath a helicopter and be carried away into the sunset. Chaibancha was supposed to climb onto the ladder with his feet on the bottom rung, but at the time of filming the helicopter was slightly too high, meaning that Chaibancha could only reach the bottom rung with his hands. Dangling dangerously from the ladder, he was lifted high into the air. Suddenly, he lost his grip and plunged to his death. Apparently the footage of his fall actually made it into the finished movie and was shown to audiences across Thailand. The film was transferred to DVD in 2005, and although they do show him hanging from the ladder, they removed the part where he falls off. One of the most famous on-set deaths occurred during filming of the 1983 Twilight Zone movie. In the time out section of the film, there's a scene where the protagonist is sent back in time to the Vietnamese War. In this scene, actor Vic Morrow carries two children, 7-year-old Micah Din Lee and 6-year-old Rennie Shin Yi Chen, across a shallow lake whilst explosions go off behind them and a helicopter flies overhead. The problem was they were filming in the early hours of the morning. Director John Landis couldn't get permission to use children at such a late hour. In order to get around this, he simply bypassed safety regulations. He hired the children without permits, paying the parents cash in hand so it wouldn't show up on any of the records. He also failed to inform the fire safety crew that there would be children on the set. Watching the footage now, it's clear how dangerous it was. The explosions are massive and the children must have been terrified. Apparently when the explosives started going off, the helicopter pilot decided it was too dangerous and tried to get out of there, but Landis told him just to fly lower. As Morrow and the children get about halfway across the lake, disaster strikes. A mistimed explosion catches the back of the helicopter, damaging the tail rotor. The helicopter crashes down on top of Morrow and the children. Vic Morrow and Micah Din Lee were both hit by the rotor blades and decapitated. Rennie Shin Yi Chen was crushed beneath the vehicle. All three of them were killed instantly. If you watch this reaction from a crew member when he goes to help, you might get a good idea of what horrific state the bodies were in. The accident led to a massive lawsuit, with the director, the helicopter pilot, the production manager and an explosives specialist all being tried for manslaughter. They were all acquitted after a 9-month-long trial, and the families of the deceased received millions in settlement. The scene was cut from the final release of the movie, although it's pretty easy to find online. If you're watching on Patreon, I've included the uncut footage. If you're watching on YouTube, then I'm not taking any risks. It's pretty easy to find though if you just search for it. It's not that gory or anything, I'm just not sure what I'm allowed to show on here anymore. Finally, I couldn't make this video without talking about The Crow, the 1994 movie starring Brandon Lee, Bruce Lee's son. There's a scene where Eric Draven, played by Lee, tries to stop his fiancée from being attacked and he gets shot with a .44 Magnum. There's a few different shots in this scene. This one shows the gun close up, and for this they put dummy bullets into the gun. These are rounds with all the gunpowder taken out, so from the front the gun looks like it's full of bullets, but in actual fact they're completely inert. In another shot they fire the gun at Draven, and for this they removed the dummy bullets and inserted blanks. The problem is, one of the dummy bullets remained in the chamber. The explosion from the blank round launched the bullet out of the chamber, hitting Brandon Lee in the abdomen. He was rushed to hospital and underwent 6 hours of surgery, but then sadly died. A lot of people still believe that Brandon Lee's death was left in the final release of the movie. It's achieved a bit of an urban legend status as a kind of cursed film that shows a real killing. In actual fact, the scenes were reshot with a body double. Lee's face was digitally superimposed onto the double. This is the first time CGI was used to reanimate a deceased actor. There's been many more on-set deaths that I could talk about. This wasn't meant to be a comprehensive list. I just picked a few that I found interesting to talk about. Maybe I'll cover some more in a future video, so if you've got any suggestions then leave them in the comments below. Shout out to everyone supporting the channel on Patreon and PayPal. Thanks a lot to all of you who keep the channel going. If you'd also like to help out, then check out the link to my Patreon on screen now. Another way you can help out the channel is simply by giving it a thumbs up and leaving a comment. Cheers for watching, and until next time, goodbye.